Hello, I'm Mr. Jarrett. Today we're going to be talking about the orchestra, and we're going to be talking about specifically about strings today. So there are four parts to the orchestra. There are the string section, the brass, the woodwinds, and the percussion. So the strings, there's four types of strings, and you can see that we have three of them here. The violin, the viola, and the cello. And there's also a double bass, which is much bigger than the cello. It's 6 feet tall, just a little taller than I am. I don't happen to have one. But we'll be talking about strings and how they work today and what they're made of. So let's get started. So as you can see, each one is a little bigger than the next, and the bigger the body of the instrument, the lower the sound can get. So a violin has a much higher register. It can go almost to the top end of where a piano is, or the same range as a soprano, which is a very high female singer. And then the viola has an octave below that, which is more like a man's voice or a low female voice. And the cello is under that, and the bass is even lower. Most people can't sing in a double bass range. So the way that these instruments work is that there are strings, and when you press down on the string, it holds a certain pitch in place, and you can play it either by plucking it or by bowing it. And when you bow it, you can sustain a note out. So the bow, I don't know if you can see this, is actually made of horse hairs. And they're pulled really tightly, and then they're covered in a resin, which is like tree sap, almost like molasses or maple syrup that's really hard and old. So that causes it to grip, and it causes it to grab the string, and as it grabs it, it keeps it moving. So there are different techniques to playing strings. The first would be to bow, which is the most common. And then there's plucking it, which is called pizzicato, which can almost sound like when you're watching a cartoon, like somebody sneaking down the stairs. And that has a very cool effect that composers often use in symphonic music. So that is stringed instruments. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate a little bit about, we'll talk about tuning and playing, and you heard a little bit of the cello, so we're going to play with the viola for a minute. So as you turn with these pegs, they either tighten or loosen the strings. Like you heard it go down. If I go the other way, there it goes up. So that's about where I want it. The viola and the violin are held by your chin and your shoulder. And typically, somebody is standing like this, and the viola has this lower range to it. So that's the viola. The violin is a little bit higher. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Beethoven, Ludwig van Beethoven. This is a picture of him. He was a German composer and pianist in the 1770s, was when he was born, and then he died in the early 1800s. He wrote music in the classical era. I believe you guys are studying the classical era in your history, and just like in history, there are musical periods as well, and the classical era is when Beethoven did his composing and writing. So we'll be talking about Beethoven. And let's see, I mentioned he was a pianist, so he's most famous for his piano sonatas. And sonatas are a collection of 3 songs. It's like 3 songs in one. So one of the songs that we're going to be studying today is the Moonlight Sonata. And we're also going to be looking at his 5th symphony. And we talked about symphonies earlier, that's for orchestras. His 5th symphony is the most famous one. I'm sure you guys have all heard that before. So, all right, let's get started. Okay, so we mentioned earlier about a sonata being in 3 parts. So the Moonlight Sonata is also very well known, and you guys may have heard it. Sonata. Sonatas are usually tied together, the three parts, by some kind of musical theme. So this repeating three-note pattern is also a huge part of the third movement, which is a lot faster, but it's in the same key and it's the same idea. So this pattern is the same chord broken up from the slow part, and in the third movement it's very fast. So that's the movements. The second movement is happier and very different, and it's tied together by a similar key. That's the basis of the second movement. Okay, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is very famous and starts with this this two-note line that everybody seems to know. And it's the line starts off with strings, which is very appropriate for what we're talking about today. The strings carry the melody. The same melody could be played lower. So that's kind of the cool thing with the cello is you get these nice beefy low notes. So the Fifth Symphony, I'm sure you guys are going to be listening to that, but the strings start off with the melody, and then later on, other sections of the orchestra take over the melody, and the strings have an accompaniment part. So towards the end of Beethoven's life, he actually started to go deaf and eventually lost all his hearing. But that didn't stop him from making music. Already knowing in his head what music sounds like, he was able to still compose many great works, including his Ninth Symphony, which is very famous. You guys probably heard this before. So, yes, that was Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. So I hope you guys have really enjoyed learning a little about Beethoven today and a little bit about music and the strings. I just want to encourage you to go listen to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony and his Moonlight Sonata, and I hope you enjoy that. So have a great day.